All right, it is 7:04. I'll call the March 14th, 2022 Select Board meeting to order. What's the date? Oh, wait, it's not the March 4th,
28.
the 28th. I wish it was.
Minutes.
28th to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My minutes, sorry.
What's that?
I gave you my minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry
You
about
put
that.
paper in front of him and he just reads
Yeah.
it.
That's it. I read my prompter. All right, we'll start with any amendments to the agenda. You get one, right?
Have one just recommitment of taxes, which will roll into our staff appointment
Okay,
item.
so we don't need to add that.
Right.
Okay. And moving on to the minutes, 4.1, 4.2, the minutes from March 7th and March 14th. Do I have a motion on both of those?
So moved.
Moved by Rob. Do I have a
Second.
second? Seconded by Tor. Any discussion on that? All right.
I would just add, we'll amend the minutes so that it includes those present at the top.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All those in favor? All right. Passes 4, 1 absent. And then moving down to public comments not on the agenda. Board requests that public comments are limited to 5 minutes per subject. Do we have any comments not on the agenda? Once, going twice. Moving on. Move on to 7.1 American Rescue Plan spending proposal. And we have representatives from the YMCA here. Do you want to approach the bench, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your request?
Sure. You can introduce yourself while I hand out.
So my name is Karen Ann Hager, recently Smith. I recently got married, and I am the community navigator for 10 of our Lincoln County towns, which means I am your community navigator. And what we wanted to do is give a little update on what that is, because we find that a lot of people don't really understand what it is, first of all. So what we did is we put a little presentation together. This is one that we actually use with medical providers, but more importantly, with the different towns. And we're going to be going around to all of the 10 towns to give the same presentation to. One of the things that what we had discovered is that through our childcare programs as well, which is a lot of the families that we end up serving through community navigation, is that we have about 20% of our childcare families are from Newcastle. So we wanted to make sure that we were gearing the information towards the folks that live here in Newcastle.
I wanted to say one thing. There was a question of why we were going to individual towns instead of the county for funding. And the answer is within the Y. The Y tells us the national Y tells us what towns we can serve, and we have a 10-town service area. And those aren't all, there's towns in Lincoln County that we cannot serve. So that's the reason we're coming for each town. And then as Karen Ann and I talked about, there used to be a history of the Y going to each town and, requesting funding because of all the special work we do. So this is kind of going back to the direction where we used to be when Tor and I served on the Y board together years ago before I was an employee. So, and by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Sally Farrell. I'm the Director of Operations at the CLCY, and I'm a Newcastle resident.
Yeah. And the reason why we pivoted back to that is because community navigation is really about connecting our residents to services and resources that are outside of the typical basketball and soccer lessons. We're really getting back to the roots of what the YMCA is founded for. So you all have this presentation. We wanted to make a single point of contact so that folks calling in for this weren't calling into the front desk. It is kind of a confidential thing. A lot of times it's for folks that are low to moderate income that are needing resources. And a lot of times they aren't feeling comfortable just coming into the Y or calling the Y. So we wanted to make that single point of contact with a cell phone, and that goes directly to me at this time. What I do is I help people access to the local, whatever's in our local community, but also I've been helping a lot of DHHS caseworkers for the families that we serve as well. So here is kind of the list, just a brief summary of what the community navigation does. There's a whole lot more than what's on this list, but we wanted to make it pretty clean for you. Each family that comes, usually a family that comes in, they come in for something that they think they need, which is probably food, sometimes heat. Oftentimes I have elders that are sitting at home 2 days without fuel before somebody will say, hey, have you called the community navigation line? But oftentimes there's 10 other resources that they actually need and they don't even realize it. Or there's things that we can creatively help support because there isn't a resource, like a free resource, but the funds can go towards something else so that their funds can actually go to the need that is most prominent. What community navigation is not, is we want to make it clear it's not a crisis line. It is something that you call in, like a 9 to 5 thing. And if somebody leaves a message on that line, I can get back to them within 24 hours. And oftentimes the message is very helpful for me because then I can start working the ball rolling and calling the state resources or the local resources, or even some of my team or community members, because there's a lot of community members that want to help in certain ways. And that's how we make those connections and we convene those needs. One of the examples right out of the gate, that was a typical one. Casey asked me, what's your typical? And a lot of times it was the medical appointments, folks needing to get to medical appointments, and they didn't have transportation and they didn't know what fish was. So it was the ability to introduce them to that resource. And oftentimes I don't get them to call back because then that connection is made and there's a handoff being made. So that was a typical one first off. Then we started on the next page, we started, really tracking what are the needs. So this circle here is probably the most prominent things that folks are reaching out for.
Karen, what is fish?
FISH is the Friends in Service, I think is what their acronym is, but it's a free ride service. It's volunteers that's organized, I think, on the Glidden Street, the folks of that church, but then also other people have found out about it and they volunteer and they coordinate the free rides to mostly medical appointments, but there has been others. There's been a resident actually of Newcastle who's a veteran, and we were able to give him a free membership. And his doctor really needed him to be walking more. And so we were able to connect to other veterans through the Legion and give him some companionship stuff. But then also he's able to come in and we get to chat with his family and just say, hey, we're keeping an eye on him. And he gets to feel that independence. So that's just one example that utilizes the FISH service. Some of you may have been watching through COVID. We ended up forming the Lincoln County Food Initiative, and that is still going in its own little wheel. So I'm able to connect to the Food Connector for Lincoln County. Oftentimes there's food boxes. Kiev Wavis is still doing prepared meals, and they're boxes of prepared meals. So if somebody calls in and that's what they're needing, because a lot of the nursing homes are capped. And so we're working on that. And that's the other thing that's really awesome about this is we're starting to see some data. We're starting to see where those gaps are. And we're working with legislature and with the state, with Adult Protective Services to identify where those needs are. And that's been showing itself. The next page is how many families were served through 2021. The first year that we did, we have a charity tracker so that we can track that data and the trends and things. So the first year it was really me getting familiar with that tracker. And this year we're being more precise on what we're referring to. So we're still getting accustomed to that tracker, but this was pretty much a summary. A lot of things got put into other if it was just me kind of really taking that time to hear their story and then referring out. One of the stories that I love to tell about is there was a couple that was dealing with addiction, and they were up against, some law accountability. And what's really cool is I get to work with the DA. I get to work with the sheriff's office, and we were able to serve a family. We were able to give them a membership, but then also connect them to the peer recovery meetings that are local. Newcastle does not have one currently, and that's something that I would like to work on. And those have been really successful. We have one in Wiscasset, and we have one here in Damariscotta, and then we have one in Waldoboro. And they're well attended, and we get to work with probation and their doctors, their primary care physicians. But this family came in, we got to serve their family through the tennis lessons and scholarship them all. But in the background, I'm working with mom and dad, and mom actually went for her, she's been sober for a while. I think she's 2 years sober now. And she went for an interview today to be a recovery coach over in Rockland today. It's pretty cool. Why the why? A lot of people ask us that. And the why is really centrally located. It is the hub of our community for our 10 towns. We were strategic about that. We are inclusive, and it does serve birth to death. I actually work very closely with Dusty when there's a family that doesn't have the means to coordinate their funerals. And Dusty and I pull on different resources, or we connect with community members that come alongside. The Community Energy Fund is awesome. And, now that the word is getting out, and that's one of the things we're asking for you, is to get that word out that we actually have this service. And a lot of folks now are calling into me and saying, I just want to help 2 single moms, help me out. And I make that connection for them. But it is literally from birth to death that we're serving. So as I said before, the first year, our goal was essentially just popping it up. COVID really made us aware that the need was there. I mean, some of the places that we delivered food to were like, how are these people living before this? And, there's lots of families that are living in campers. And I love, I chuckle when I hear, this doesn't happen in our town. And I can tell you right now, there are people living in campers, and there are people dealing with addiction, and they want help. They really do want help, and they're here. So we wanted to work on building those relationships, which has proven to be successful. Like I said, folks are calling in to me saying, I want to be part of the solution for when you have folks that are in need. So now we want to continue to build those relationships and raise that awareness of what community navigation is. But we also need to make it sustainable financially. And then the last 2 pages are the information on how to reach us. And like Sally said, I think it was 2006 is when we stopped asking the individual towns. Megan came on board and she was really doing an assessment. And we really wanted to take that time to really assess what the needs are.
Mhm.
And we've done a pretty good job at that, and hence the community navigation. But I think COVID, strategically, that was going to come anyway, but COVID kind of catapulted us into that. And there was only one of me, and I was running all the after school programs and doing the community navigation much sooner than I had strategically planned. But once COVID hit, we said, okay, we need to do this. And Sally took on all of my after school programs, and I easily filled 40 plus hours in community navigation. And I want to stress too that it's not just community navigation, it's also the outreach. So I help coordinate the school backpacks with Kobe and Gale and Rennie's. And we end up handing out well over 100 backpack and school supplies, along with resources. I coordinate all of the nonprofits that come in so that it's a one-stop shop for those families that really are like timid about asking for help. And it's anything from New Hope, Midcoast, or FAME on how to set your child up for a scholarship when you don't really think that you have money to do that. You can't even imagine. And we get all those resource tables there. We also provide for the families during holidays with Thanksgiving meal baskets and Christmas, so that families can actually have Christmas and pay attention to their bills instead of making sure that their kids have a Christmas. So we do a lot of outreach programs in addition to the community action. Yeah, right now, Waldeboro specifically has me come right to their town office, and I have an office there, and they do a contract because the need was great, and they didn't realize that the need was so great. And, as they were finding out that I was there, the people were coming in, and they just recently added it to my.
How often, what's your schedule?
So I do 20 hours over
Oh,
there.
wow.
Mhm. Ideally, what we would like that to be is just spread out through all 10 towns.
Gonna need more of you.
More of me.
Clone.
There are actually folks that are like, if you're ever hiring, and so that, and you know, we laugh, but that is where it's coming to, because the need is great, and we will probably bring on a part-time navigator. Mhm.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's
Do you, out of the 446 people served, do you have statistics on how many are from Newcastle?
I think what we had come to was the 20% of the
Just of the childcare families, 20% of them come from Newcastle.
childcare and our community navigation. We get, I mean, I would say, and it's not just low income. I need to stress that too. I have a lot of folks that are coming in right now that are moderate income, that do not have heat right now, and the inflation is affecting all of us. So,
And these folks aren't necessarily all members, right? They're just.
no,
So
no.
how?
Oftentimes they're not.
If they're not members, how do they hear about your service?
Because I'm hoping that people like you, David, will spread the word that
Okay.
this is something that the towns are supporting.
Right.
So hence, by default, they're members of our community. And And honestly, a lot of them do become members because there's certain donors that say, I want a scholarship 10%, but I want them to be Newcastle residents. So I get to be that in between, and a lot of it's confidential, right? So I get to connect to that, but we have to pay for the community navigation.
And
I'd
the
love to do
Y-
it for free. I will when I retire, I promise. But right now I gotta support 2 kiddos at home.
And the Y is for all. So anyone, whether a member or not, is always welcome to walk into the Y. And we have a membership for all. So many people come in and they can't afford it. We look at their income, that's all confidential too. And we figure out a way to get them in, whether we're scholarshiping all of that, where they have we like for them to have a small kind of skin in the game,
Accountability.
But yeah, so it is for all, and we really make sure we do that. So there's a lot of scholarshiping that's going on within the Y that we're covering.
It's being funded internally right now.
A lot
Yeah.
through our fundraising, and it costs $68,000 a year to run right now.
Yeah.
As the need becomes greater, which is what we're already seeing, then, there's going to be that many more people.
Have you identified funding sources like local towns, or other funding sources?
Private funding sources.
Right now, why we're coming out is because, there's that good side of COVID, and we've been able to apply for grants, 2 years ago, a year ago. And we're getting to the point where, okay, what are we going to do to sustain this? Because clearly we've identified the need. How do we keep it going? How do we not lose this momentum so that folks are sustain themselves?
So just you're looking for ongoing.
Correct.
Not just the
Yeah.
part, the way we started this discussion.
Yeah.
That's the context of work. But you're really looking for an ongoing program.
We're looking for now and moving forward. Correct.
And I really feel like once you see the now and invest in the now, then in the future years, it's just going to make so much sense when you see what it's doing for your community. I mean, that's the, really the bottom sell is how I look at it, because I see
Yeah.
what she does in the community every day.
And so what would this funding directly, how would this directly affect the program? What.
Yeah, well, as I said, there's the salary of my position.
Yep.
Right. There's everything that goes into that.
Yep.
There's also the subsidy that we help with those families, whether we're connecting them to a program in the Y or even out of the Y. So with that, there's other, it's like you take some of this bucket and then you add it to some of your bucket, so to speak. Salvation Army, it's like a puzzle, and we have to move those town funds in to make that puzzle whole.
Yeah.
Is what's happening.
And this would be an investment to directly to keep it running.
Keep it
right
going.
now.
Yeah.
It's not like we're trying to save up for this or whatever. This is something that you guys are.
To keep it going.
Yeah.
In your request to the other towns are going to be the same as the request to Newcastle.
We're
Where-
going around and, assessing what the needs are in the different towns, educating them about what we're doing, and
Yeah.
Are we the first, or have you hit some others?
are our first.
We are outside of Waldeboro, David, where, we wanted to get it kicked off and do a soft start in Waldeboro, and that just exploded. We just had no idea. And then when I started looking at all the different outreach initiatives, Newcastle was most prominent, next to Waldeboro. So we wanted to start with Newcastle and Damascus.
Did I catch it right that they're funding you the 20 hours? So that's sort of what they're throwing in.
They are right now. Yeah.
And that's part of our strategy this year, is to get the education out to all our town sets. So from when we just started our strategic plan at the beginning of the year. So
It's
here we
the
are. in March.
program itself. I don't want to confuse it. It's the program itself. Yes, it's paying for my salary, but the need has shown that we need to bring on a part-time navigator. So in order to make it sustainable so that we're not, having people call and I can't get to them, or I can't get DHHS to get to them because it's not on my day that I'm here, then we need to have somebody that's kind of under me that I can do a handoff to. I can get it started and then do a handoff and have, literally it's like 5 or 6 different phone calls of resources that you need to pull for families.
Right now, your program's at 67. So obviously.
That's our strategic plan. yeah.
The more people know about it, the faster that's gonna.
Is the navigator program, is that a Y national thing, or is that something?
It's something that actually started in Booth Bay.
Uh-huh.
Holly Stover, that group started it down there. This is more about connecting to resources. It's not having them come into my office and doing therapy. That's not me. What I do is I do a handoff. And some of the stories in Waldeboro are literally life-saving. I mean, I literally have two elderly women that were in their home, neglected, and was able to get them into adult protective services and then connected to facilities, assisted living. We've had fires. I'm sure you've seen it in the news. There's been a ton of fires. There's one man who only a 5th grade education, and we were able to help him get connected to Knox County Homeless Coalition. And he's now he was living in a camper with no heat. And now he's getting fed, every day with Meals on Wheels. He's warm, and he's got new clothes, because there are caring individuals that say, hey, when you have a family that you think that I could help, call me. And so I have that too, like that. It's a puzzle. It really is a puzzle.
But you're just sort of addressing the immediate need. It's not curing the overall underlying problems.
Right. But like I said earlier, what's happening is we're starting to see that data. We're starting to identify those gaps. And the state has actually said, how come you're not working for us? And I said, because this is my home and I want to be here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I thought that we could just sort of review, reflect, and go over this at our next meeting with the full board present for making
Makes
the
sense.
appointment.
Sure.
So,
Yep.
if there are any other questions that come up that we have, do we have your contact information in here? Okay.
I'll
I
get
was
you.
gonna
All
say,
right.
if she doesn't have her number in there, that's really bad for a navigator. right?
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was great,
Yeah,
great hearing
thank
about your
you.
program. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Congratulations on the marriage.
Yeah. Thanks.
Have a good night. Yes, it was nice meeting you.
All right. Moving on to 7.2, Taniscott Fire Emergency Services Ordinance Update. This is just basically an update to what's been going on. Just to reiterate, myself, Tor, and Sarah have been meeting with a few members of the fire company and going through an ordinance, and we've been going back and forth and looking at language, and I think we're in a pretty good spot right now. And so presented, it's in our packet, and we gotta start moving forward on the next steps, which are one thing is we wanted to have a workshop. We want to set up a workshop between the select board and the fire company to just discuss, go through, discuss everything together as a group. Answer any questions that citizens might have. And go through that. So I guess that would be number one. And then we would need to move forward on going on to public hearings for both this ordinance and the citizen petition. So we got to talk a little bit about timing, dates. And we can always do the work backward thing where, yeah, what our end date is.
So our proposal for a public workshop date at this point would be Monday, April 11th at 5:30. So that would be before the select board meeting, the next regularly scheduled select board meeting with the fire company. And then from there, I figured we could set public hearing dates.
Okay.
But the version that we have now is a final draft that will be discussed.
Okay.
If the select board is okay and available on the 11th at 5:30, we'll let the fire company know and then invite them. And of course, this will be public, so anyone can come to the meeting and ask questions.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you said we're in a good spot or a good thing. Can you define that a little bit more, Dave?
I mean,
Like in your meetings, is everybody sort of in agreement that
yeah, we've
this
worked
proposal
through,
goes? Oh,
at least with the members that we've been, working with, and they've been going back, talking to, fire company. We've just been trying to, basically resolve issues with language, and just clarifying certain, roles, responsibilities.
So you anticipate the next workshop to be different than the last workshop?
That's the hope.
Does that work for you? 5:30?
On the 11th.
On the 11th.
So we'll start there and then move forward with setting public hearing dates for.
We can do that at a workshop. So that's not voting on it. We can't vote on things at a workshop, but we can set
We'll
dates.
we'll have our meeting the next.
Right,
and
right. Oh, right, that's
Right
a few minutes
after.
later. Right. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we can, if we need to.
Make all the
Decide it.
action. Make all the action.
Perfect.
on that.
Yep. Great.
All right. So anything else?
I thought the draft was good.
That's great. Okay. All right. So we'll do that. All right, moving on to 7.3 town meeting scheduling discussion. So this is talking about our annual town meeting, which we haven't had in person in 2 years.
Right.
And we have, looking at,
Kind of seems like maybe we can.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the idea.
So that's the question.
I know a lot of other
Yeah.
towns have had in person.
Yep.
Yep.
And the ones I've gone to that, some people wear masks.
So the only thing that would be a little bit different this year than it has been in the past in Newcastle is Election Day would be June 14th. And typically, town meeting is then scheduled for the following Monday. This year, it's that following Monday is Juneteenth. So town office will be closed, the state's closed. So we're proposing, if we have an in-person town meeting, having it on the 21st, which is a Tuesday night, as opposed to that Monday.
I think that's fine. And we have someone spoken to Lincoln Academy. and
Yep.
the-
We have reserved Lincoln Academy.
That date works okay.
Yep.
with them. So, yeah. That sounds good.
The 21st.
21st.
Ben, you got a question? Approach the bench.
I'll speak up. Can you hear me?
You can't avoid it.
That's right.
We're gonna be up there in a minute anyway.
I was just wondering when you're talking about town meetings. There we go. We're talking about town meeting in person. Are we thinking about using the clickers?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. We just need to be prepared for that. There's software that needs to be updated and
Right.
Yep.
things that need to be done to make that work. And we need to determine who's running it because I've run it every year we've done it. But if you'd like to run it, I'd rather not. So,
I've used iClickers in classes before,
okay,
so I
Great.
should be okay.
not difficult. If you know PowerPoint, you can make it.
Got it.
Just check.
We gotta blow the cobwebs off them and charge.
It's been a while,
Yeah.
exactly. Might check some
Go through,
batteries.
check some
and-
battery,
oh,
make
yeah.
sure they're all
Yep.
working.
No, it's-
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks. All right. Any other discussion around that? Good?
Yeah.
All right.
So it sounds like we'll plan on having it in person.
Barring any unforeseen occurrences, which.
Knock on wood.
All right, so then moving on to 7.4 staff appointments. This is just shifting a couple of duties around. I'll let you
Yes.
explain all this.
We are asking the select board to confirm the appointments of interim town clerk, interim tax collector, interim registrar to Jody Kelly and treasurer to myself. That will be permanent for the treasurer piece. And then have the select board sign off on a certificate of recommitment. This is for taxes that were already committed in the prior fiscal year, but just certifying Jody to be able to collect on those taxes. So,
Okay.
Yep, these are just the proposed staff appointments and hoping to get everyone's approval for that.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to make those appointments?
Seconded by Tor. All right, any other further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Passes 4-0. All right, there we go. Man, we're doing pretty good on time, Ben. Moving on, 7.5.
Was
Housing-
there an implication?
Housing
Right.
presentation and policy proposal from Ben Fry. Ben Fry, would you please approach the bench?
Well, I'm hoping to begin a discussion about housing and zoning. And there's a lot of pieces at play, so bear with me if my thoughts are scattered. I'll try to get it all out. I guess part of the impetus for why I'm here is that I read and have had long conversations with people who know more about it than I do, but the proposed legislation LD 2003 that addresses the emergency situation in Maine regarding affordable housing and the proposed solutions that that bill, proposed bill contains. And I'm a little dismayed with the bill itself. I think it's really kind of tone deaf, unfortunately, especially for towns like Newcastle, for whom it really would not do much. So after reading that and discussing it with people who just make sure I had my head on straight about what it was actually saying, I thought, why don't we start having discussions about what we could do ourselves to address housing in Newcastle? I think that by any metric, we're in the middle of a housing crisis, like a 5-alarm fire crisis. And the pandemic has taken what was a slow march toward gentrification in Newcastle, which has been happening for decades now, and put it right into warp speed, like warp 10. And so ask anyone who's trying to find housing, ask anyone who's trying to find a rental. They don't exist. Rental prices have gone through the roof. Property sales have gone through the roof. The national average is that year over year, we're looking at 22 to 29% median home price increase, which is nuts. I would say in Newcastle alone, My guess is we'd be substantially above that, that being the median. To me, that's a huge problem. We had spent no small amount of time in the conversations around creating the new comprehensive plan and the core zoning code about, what types of housing were appropriate in what different parts of town, what gentrification means, what sprawl means and how to combat it. And the legislation that they're proposing, in particular, the item that would allow in any district or area of town within a municipality that allows housing to be, would require that the municipality allow up to 4 units to be on the lot. I think that's entirely tone deaf and leads to a huge amount of unintended consequences, none of which are good. So that aside, I think, we should talk more. I'd love it if we could talk more about the bill and sending a letter asking them to table it, put it back into committee, take it off the table, anything. I think, from Newcastle, if we could have something official, I'd be in support of that. And I'd be in support of having more conversation about that. But specifically, I think there's a lot that we can do on our own. And I think it's not outside the realm of possibility to consider that we go it alone and try to solve not the big problem, because I'll be honest, it's unsolvable. Everyone in the country, a lot of places in the country are trying to crack this nut, and no one has the perfect solution. It doesn't exist, or not that I've heard of. But I don't think that means that we should just throw our hands up in the air and say, well, it's too tough to deal with, let's not do anything. I think there are things that we can do, and I think there's things that we should consider doing. So what I did is, in your packet, I put together a couple of 3 example programs of things that we could do. They're examples. They're not prescriptive by any means. They're just a place to begin a conversation. They're ideas I had about ways that we could start tackling the problem. Traditionally, when we're talking about housing, specifically affordable housing, and I'll take just a quick second to talk about the definition of affordable housing, because it has become a moving target. When you say affordable housing pre-pandemic, it came with the sort of negative connotation of Section 8 housing or similar. And now that definition has changed. There are other terms like accessible housing, available housing, none of which we have.
Workforce housing.
Workforce housing, which we also don't have. And they're really aimed at describing the condition now where not just low income, but medium, moderate income families, households, young families, whatever, just simply can't afford housing at all. And truth be told, they can't even afford the rent in the places that they want to live. That's tragic. One of the goals of the comp plan and the core zoning code was to find creative ways to incentivize our young people to stay and invest in Newcastle. And a large part of that means building a home here. If they can't afford to do that, I don't think it's outside the realm of reasonableness for us to ask ourselves if there's any way that we can help them. So the definition of affordable, I think, has moved up out of the low income into the middle income definition. Everyone, I think, recognizes that. Anyone read an article, any article, say basically that same thing. That missing middle housing that we were talking about back in 2016 is kind of a joke conversation right now. I mean, it's laughable how bad it is if it wasn't so sad. So I think I'd be happy to talk about what's in the packet, although I really think that what I'd like to encourage the board to consider would be to form some kind of working group ASAP to look at possible things that the town could do to address affordable housing in Newcastle, because I think waiting for the state to come along and solve our problems for us is just not going to happen. And I don't think we should play that game. And I also don't think we should just wait for the market to solve the problem for us, because we know the direction the market's moving. We know the direction that it's moving fast. And if we don't do something to carve out something, then I don't want to sound dire, but it's going to be very, very even more expensive to live here than it currently is, which is troubling for a lot of people. So I think what I'd like to do is recommend the first thing I put on there was to, and a lot of towns are doing similar things, is do everything we can to incentivize the creation of accessory dwelling units. Low hanging fruit is just waive the permit fees for anyone that creates an accessory dwelling unit in Newcastle. That's easy peasy. It's not much.
Can you explain what an accessory dwelling? Is,
Sure.
how it interfaces with our
Yeah.
code?
The core zoning code really, for the most part, defines a dwelling. Okay, let me put it another way. You're allowed to basically have, let's pick a district, say you're in D1. You're basically allowed, if you have a house, you can have 2 dwelling units in that house. Say you have, you live on the ground floor maybe, and you turn the top floor into an apartment, and they have separate entrances and they don't share like a communal space, right? You can have 2 dwelling units for, 2 single family dwelling units in that shell of a house. And then you're also allowed to build an accessory dwelling unit, either attached to the main building or detached from the main building. So you can have a total of 3 dwelling units in that district. That's pretty true for any district that has that scenario where you're allowed to have a single family home. Basically, you can create 3 dwelling units on that land in that manner. You're allowed in other districts to create multi-unit residential uses, duplexes, triplexes. You can have, larger in different districts. So an additional dwelling unit would mean that if you have only, a single family home and you live in it and you don't do nothing else, but you want to convert that top of your garage into another dwelling unit, go for it. That's adding an additional dwelling unit. Or if you've got that, that garage that's sitting over there, you want to convert that to, another unit all by itself, that's another way to do it. Or
And this is
put it
some-
on an addition, create an actual addition on your.
this is something that's been available to people in Newcastle for years, right?
No,
Oh, really?
no,
Oh, interesting.
this only leading the witness.
Do tell us.
Tell us more. About
So
this.
anyway, that ability was only sort of afforded to Newcastle residents with the adoption of the core zoning code on January 1st, 2021. But since then, anyone has been able to take advantage of that. Because of the housing crisis, I'm suggesting as a citizen that we consider waiving permit fees on anyone who creates an additional dwelling unit.
What are the typical fees?
Oh, yeah, I'd have to say, top of my head, it'd be not including the plumbing fee, $100.
Would waiving that fee be a big enough of an incentive to?
Absolutely not. But it sends a message. And I think the message is that we're looking at this. We want to be serious about it. This is something we can do that's easy, and we're trying to do something more. It is a pittance, but it's not nothing.
I think it's also, it's a statement of intent, and one of our goals with the code was to get everyone to come in and get permits and not have the fees. I mean, we set the fees low in order to encourage that, but I think also just saying there is no fee, I think it's like that can be a psychological barrier. And I think so taking that away, no, this is not going to solve the problem. But I think it just statement of intent, sort of take a little bit of a barrier away. It might encourage a couple people to say, oh, well, it doesn't cost me anything. Yeah, I'll do that. I've always thought about doing that. And now it doesn't cost me anything. So I think it's step we can take. We'll see what impact it has, but I think as Ben says, it's just kind of a statement of intent.
I think establishing some sort of ad hoc board, committee of this board or the planning board to look at the issue of affordable housing and come up with, creative solutions to the problem quickly would be advisable. I think that considering partnering with Maine Housing at mainehousing.org, who has the blueprint for a lot of this stuff already done. A lot of the work is just literally waiting to just be plucked and implemented. Everything from low income housing tax credit programs to how do you incentivize developers through the creation of TIF districts. I think that when you're talking about trying to incentivize housing, there are really only two approaches. One is through zoning changes, and those can take either the carrot or stick approach, which is the dangle the carrot of things like bonus density for developers that meet certain criteria. They're allowed to increase their density of a certain project if they provide X number of affordable dwelling units within that project. Typically, those are only between 3 and 7%, although Tor, you might know better. This is what my research showed of the total number of units of the project. So we're talking about large scale projects and large scale developers, none of which I think we'll really see here. So that's why we might have to get a little more creative in that. The stick is to, from a zoning perspective, is to just change the zoning to, like they're proposing to do with LD 2003, say, these are the new rules. Here's your density. You got to meet this. Here's the criteria. I'm not such a fan of that because we just went through years and years of work calibrating our code to our districts. Until we see strong evidence that that needs to be changed, I don't know that it would behoove us to go tinkering with it too much. I think we've got a great framework in place. I think we should utilize it, and I think we should incentivize it, which is what the second proposal program that I put in your packet was aimed at doing. The third and probably the most, or second and the most lucrative way of producing housing, affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, is through tax incentives. Those can take the form of a TIF, it can take the form of tax credits, tax rebates, or subsidies for developers. And I think at this point, everything should be on the table. I really do. I think everything should be looked at, considered strongly.
One thing when you say developer, that can be a homeowner who wants to, that term is not big developer from
Not a
out of
big
town
D.
coming in.
Not capital D.
It's anybody who wants to do something with their property. So I think
That's a really good point. And I think, we need to start again by getting the word out that anybody that has the capacity in Newcastle to, modify a portion or one of the structures on their property to be an accessory dwelling unit. I think we should try and send the message we want to help with that. And yeah, so partnering with Maine Housing, and then I think in order to get to the incentives, the tax incentives, what everyone really doesn't want to talk about is that it costs money. It costs money, and towards that end, I think the thing that I think we should consider that's probably going to be the hardest would be setting up a fund, a town reserve account. And I think immediately we should consider the possibility of starting to funnel any and all permit fees, fines, any of those sort of like unbudgetable, incidental revenue streams into the reserve account. And the purpose of the reserve account would be to support the programs that we eventually come up with. But I think it's important that we maybe consider creating that reserve account now. And maybe putting some ARPA funds in, maybe putting some fund balance in. I think, again, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So in a nutshell, housing is a crisis. The one last thing I kind of want to say is that one of the most interesting approaches that I've found that some towns are looking at is instead of treating this exercise as a chore and a burden and a cost, what they're doing is they're actually running the numbers on what the return on investment for different types of development, small d or big D, would look like in different parts of town. And they're setting specific return on investment goals. What I mean by that is if the town were to create a program that provided, this is total example for simple math, a subsidy of X number of dollars to a developer to create a certain type of project in a certain district. And it was X number of dollars per unit. Those towns are saying, well, if we provide that subsidy, we'll recoup that cost in X number of years of taxes on that property. That's tax dollars we don't have now. So they're saying, look, we can make our return on investment in 3 years or 4 years or 3.5 years or 5 years. And that adds to the tax base going forward. We're going to have that on the books as taxable real estate, hopefully for a long, long time. And it's stuff we don't have now. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at the problem as something that we could invest in instead of something that we just have to put up with.
I see that, isn't it both sides though? If you're giving taxes to make something happen, doesn't that shift the burden to others? And it makes their housing more expensive. And then once the developers, big D, small d, have their project done, isn't that a tax burden on them as well? So
it doesn't necessarily
you're
have to be-
continuing to create that expensive housing. Wouldn't programs where if the state is reimbursing you for lost taxes be better? In that, we give tax breaks, but if it's a state program, then they're reimbursing the towns.
I would say we should look at all options, but if we're taking state tax money to pay for projects here, that tax money comes from somewhere too. I mean,
But it's a wider.
it's a wider net, but again, we cannot depend on the state to solve all of our problems for us. And I'm not trying to say, we should look at everything
Right.
is what I'm saying. Like, yes, absolutely.
And I agree with you. I just am wrestling with how does that work with, we're giving somebody a tax break, but the bills have to be paid. So is it the others in the community and then the people who are already struggling to pay their taxes?
Well, I mean, you could argue that spending money on roads is, we're providing something, current day taxpayers are providing something for future taxpayers. So I think the same idea, you could look at it and make the calculation that whether it's foregoing tax revenues or cash out from the town to a project, that will provide a return in taxes, in the future. So that's a, present value math calculation.
It is, I think it's a simple calculation
Yeah.
and it's one of the possibilities I'm intrigued by most simply because what other thing can a town actually spend money on where you can even talk about return on investment? When you talk about bonding a road for $2 million, you just spent $2 million on a road that 20 years, hopefully, you'll have to do again. So there's no return on investment on that road.
Well,
Zero.
There's a negative return if you don't do it.
A huge negative return, yeah. So I think that just sort of framing the conversation in a more positive way might yield some interesting results. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I don't know. I've just been doing research because I'll be honest with you, I'm in crisis mode. Everyone I talk to is asking me if I've got a rental. Literally everyone.
So I do compliment you, Ben, because a lot of people come and they complain with the problem, but you propose some solutions here. So I really appreciate it. I do have a question on the first-time homebuyer program, though, is would that be some type of income-based element to it as well? So if somebody just all their life rented, but they were wealthy, technically they would be a first-time homebuyer. So
Yeah.
there would have to be something
Oh,
there.
yeah.
So I think I agree is that if we could have some type of committee or housing authority where people would be looking at this stuff. would
Yeah.
be
Yeah. Again, Maine Housing has a lot of great information about the specifics you can place on programs like that, that would, match, income level to, affordability and, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, and then you put covenants on it so that like you buy it, you can't turn around and sell it. You can't use it as a B&B. I mean, there's a whole lot of issues that would go with it. So, I mean, really just take what's there as like very top level ideas like, hey, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall. Maybe something will stick, but if something sticks, let's flesh it out.
Or just having a fund that could be used for community loans.
Yep.
To help.
I mean, one of the things we have to be careful about is administration,
Yeah.
burden and things like that. So we can, like, I think the idea of a tasking group with studying this makes a lot of sense. I mean,
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think, we're not trying to approach anything with the idea that's kind of not every other town is looking at, but some towns have what they're called planners. To actually
What a
charge, be in
concept.
charge, that are charged with kind of looking at these issues.
Yep.
I think if it's a committee, it's got to be a small committee. You just can't, there's got to be a focus and a task. And I think maybe the committee is like an information gathering body, sort of a solution body. But I mean, that's the point. And you're right. We have to talk about this. It's a scary topic to avoid, but avoiding it and ignoring it isn't good either. It's just as scary. So, yeah, we have to somehow wrap our arms around it. We don't have a plan. So we have to find out some way to talk about this. That's above the pay grade of the select board.
Yeah.
It's just too much detail there to sit through.
It's a huge amount. It is a huge amount. I don't disagree with you. I think distilling it down to some simple things that we could do to start off with, like permit fees.
That's a no-brainer.
That's a
I'll vote for that
no-brainer.
tonight.
That's a slam
Yeah.
dunk, right?
Yeah.
But then, yeah, having a committee look at it quickly. I don't want to do something foolhardy or rash. I don't want to waste the town's funds at all. I want to be careful and precise with how the programs that we, create. I guess I'm just thinking that we actually have the authority to create them. We don't have to wait for someone else to solve this problem for us, at least partially.
Yeah.
And then any little bit is going to help, honestly, any little bit. So it's up to you, whether it's an ad hoc board, ad hoc board of the Board of Selectmen or the planning board. I don't know. I thought, off the top of my head, if we could get a realtor involved, if we could get a builder involved, if we could get a developer to even just maybe come and talk with us and give us ideas about what they would find enticing, we'd have some place to start.
Cheaper construction costs.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, labor
Lower
and materials
interest
we're
rates.
not going to
Yeah.
fix. I know that one.
Easier places to build.
I mean, that's it.
No ledge.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is so systemic. It's
Yeah.
like I said, it's hard to wrap your arm. I mean, it's
Then
it's
the labor force to build it,
yeah.
I mean, that's really-
it's
coming down to what we're
yeah.
Yeah.
But besides the material, the location and labor,
Finance.
everything's fine, right?
Yeah. But, okay, so in the program 2, when you're thinking about return on investment, one of the things that I put in there as an idea was to create a tax rebate. It could be a tax credit. Doesn't matter how it works exactly, but the idea would be to provide some sort of money back on taxes for someone in D1 in rural, for example, to combine 2 adjacent lots into a single lot of record. That's like a 1-year ROI. What else can you get for a 1-year ROI? 1 year.
How does that help? I don't bringing two lots together into one bigger lot.
Yeah. So you've got, well, it does several things. The first thing it does is we've got, if you look at the district map of R1, we've got a lot of what they call long spaghetti lots with short frontages on the road, very deep. And they're sitting there doing relatively nothing. All the development follows the roads. But there's quite a few lots that are held by families that, have several adjacent lots next to each other or whatever. For historical reasons, they've existed as separate lots. They're paying two tax bills. If they combined them into one, they'd have a larger tax bill that should be slightly less. So it gives an incentive to combine the lots so that ultimately they pay a little less in taxes, but we get a little bit more over the long haul, and it provides more larger lots to develop the way that the code encourages. Right now, the cutting everything into tiny little lots and everything like that, it really restricts what can be done on those lots. So we could do more. We could provide more housing. We could provide more types of development that is effective in that district in particular. If we didn't have all those little tiny lots,
While protecting the character, of that district. So, so the development would happen in a way that would be less problematic than.
Still seems like you'd need more incentive to say, okay, you have your sort of cheaper tax lots, but to actually make them build affordable housing on them.
No.
Yeah.
We wouldn't. No, that's not the point. We would never force anyone to build anything. We'd incentivize it.
Right.
Yeah. No.
But how
Little
would
steps.
you go, what would that next step be? How would you do that?
No, that's what I'm talking about. We'd create a program where they could tap into some funds to help them do a project. Somehow.
I think what we need to do is support our comprehensive plan and the intent of those two documents. And I think what we don't want to do is just sort of just blow it out of the water. Just say, yeah, let's just do this because we need the housing. I think we got to keep those two things.
I completely agree, and that's part of why I'm so
And I'm not
upset
saying-
about LD
I'm not
2003.
telling you, I'm telling.
I agree, absolutely, yeah.
Right.
But I got to plug it because I
Yeah.
think there are some good things in LD 2003, but in general, it would do more harm than good, especially for small towns in Maine, in my opinion. It would add the potential to add huge amounts of sprawl is just ridiculous. It's an ill-conceived
Well,
solution.
we've been there. I mean, that's what happens.
Yeah.
It destroys towns.
So we have a town plan implementation committee that we have to get going. I'm wondering if that could be one of the
It's true. Yeah.
one of the tasks that we could put on. I mean, first we got to form the committee. We got to find people to be on the committee. Then we have to find out if they're interested, able, and willing to look at that.
That's a really good point. 'cause
But I
that's
just think
something-
that it is always good to have that reflection back on the comprehensive plan, which does lay out all these things, and it affects multiple levels of that. One of the big ideas that we have is business everywhere. And that's great, except for the fact that if you don't have anyone to work, then you're not going to have business everywhere. And people do like to live and work in the same place. It's pleasant. It's a pleasant way of life. So I think that a lot of these, ideas could build on that. So it's something to.
Something that is a good structure, because that's a structure we started, and we've identified that we want that group to be working. This could be a task for that group.
Something that we have to do.
I mean, obviously, we
anyway.
need to populate that group.
Yeah.
Sparse number of people.
So that would be a potential way to start looking at this, and then from there.
So how many people were you hoping to get on the comp plan implementation? CPIC?
CPEC,
Yeah.
more than one.
More than one.
Uh,
So I want to balance Tor's comments
Yeah.
against the idea that if we have a large committee, 5, 7 people working on comp plan implementation, that's advantageous. But 5 or 7 people talking about housing is
I
make
And
it
I think
go
that's where
really
like
slow.
a subgroup, like we did, in the various iterations of the code.
Mhm.
We broke off into smaller groups and had subcommittees,
Yeah.
doing that kind of thing. And I think, again, it would be a good way to attract people to the comp plan implementation committee. I had a few people, not many, but a couple people say, hey, can you get something that's fun to do for the town, for a committee? I'd love to do it.
Are
So
they
that-
implying that this isn't fun?
No, this is great. This is beyond fun. But no, I think that, and again, in the very beginning of and throughout the code, a lot of ideas, a lot of the fun, positive way for the community to interface.
So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no,
the CPIC,
See,
never thought about it as
Yeah, I
an
know.
acronym, but the comp plan implementation committee, I thought was probably, 5, 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it has a little bit of, I think you want it large enough so that it's covers good, representation of the town. I think what we're talking about tonight is something a little bit more laser focused. And I think it could be a sub part of that committee. And then, like I said, I think I think it's got to be, whatever happens in this kind of idea of how do we address housing, it's just part of the bigger comprehensive picture. And I think that's where those two kind of committees.
And I like the structure of having it as being a subcommittee of, I mean, it kicks us to get the implementation committee reconstituted and going.
Yeah.
Which is something we should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
And that, putting it in the context of the comp plan, I think helps ground it for Newcastle. So I think I like the idea. Yes, it needs to be a smaller group. It's got a real tight focus, but being part of that larger group, I think makes a lot of sense. And hopefully those people will stick around and work on the other comp plan issues.
So we are still waiting to hear back from the state on final comp plan approval. But when we have that, what if we scheduled a comp plan committee meeting and had a member of the select board and then maybe come and speak to this and talk about moving forward?
Do
I'd
we have
say
a s-
don't even.
I was gonna say, do we have a sense of when that
Yeah.
would be?
Yeah.
Yes,
Because-
they gave deadlines though, subject to change, March and April for the, I don't know that, I don't have the dates off the top of my head. I'd have to do a quick search.
Well,
through
this
my
week is
email.
March, it ends in April. so-
Right.
This week,
Right now.
Right.
Yeah,
End
Um,
of April, we're hoping, but
I mean, if they come back with the, recommendations for alterations to the comp plan, the broader comp plan implementation committee can tackle those at the same time that the subcommittee can move forward on housing. I don't see that we need to wait. And I would urge
one of the
that
things,
we get on this.
one of the things that they wanted was basically a comp plan implementation committee.
Well, that's, yeah.
A review.
Yeah, right.
So it's already something that we should, and we have, it's just something to definitely keep our heads on as we enter budget season and all that stuff. So there's a lot going on. But
So thank you for that segue. Last point is I'd love for you to strongly consider creating a reserve account. A housing reserve account. Could have $0 in it, though I'd love to see it funded in a variety of ways. And if you created a policy that just put all permit fees, fines, and those incidentals into it just to start, great. If you would consider ARPA money, if you consider some general fund money to kick it off, bigger we can get it, the more we can do.
That's great.
Do you have folks in mind, not just professions, but individuals? for-
Yeah, I know, I'd like to have a conversation with Bonnie Stone. She's a Realtor. She has a lot of planning board experience, and I think she'd be great. I don't know if she'd be interested. Yeah, for the Realtor. I'd love to see, maybe either or Joel represent the building side of the equation. If they're so inclined, although we can look for someone else in the community that would, be so inclined and have that sort of background to represent that facet. I don't have a developer in mind, although I can reach out and find a couple. I don't know that, I don't know any developers who reside in Newcastle that would sit on a committee necessarily, but I know several who are out of town who might be willing to come and speak and give ideas. That's possible.
I think that would make sense. I mean, developer is such a non-described title.
It is. It's a
It's
non-title.
really could
Yeah.
be anything. So,
Yeah.
And if you're a group reaching out to experts like that to get more information, you don't need them on a committee. You can
Yeah.
invite them in.
Right.
There's, I've talked to people from local banks as well, that have had a conversation with one person. They said that they were excited about our code. Said, wow, this is really great
Yeah.
for development. And they always point future investors in the area to look at our code.
Banker would be great. And honestly, that's one of the things that I saw a possibility of other towns doing is partnering with a bank or some financial institution, to provide some sort of, a funding model to get either first-time home buyers on board with the program or provide some sort of mechanism to create multifamily housing development, things like that.
The banker's your sort of backdoor into before it becomes reality and everything's hush hush.
They're also going to have a lot of information about how
Yeah.
the financing end of things works. And I think it's not a bad idea.
There's a banker who lives very close to it. I think she's interested.
Might be interesting.
Yeah.
So I think we could pull together a small group pretty quickly. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think we should authorize them to do that.
Is it something you're looking to?
Yes, I would love to do it.
Okay.
So do we, the complementation, comp plan implementation, CPIC. Okay, thank you.
It just
Uh,
rolls off. the
It
tongue.
doesn't exist now, right? Because we had it and it's expired.
Right,
Um,
and we need to get the comp plan approved before we can appoint the comp plan.
See,
Well, we called
implementation.
it, the group that updated the comp plan.
So-
We had created that committee. And the idea was that was the core of what would end up being larger. So that did exist to make the changes to the comp plan that the state requested.
I don't think there's any reason why we can't just have it.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. I don't think,
I mean, the state's not stopping us. from doing it. There's no,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any. reason.
no, I agree.
I mean,
So I
yeah, we
think,
want the state to approve a comp plan,
right,
but
but
it doesn't change the dynamics. of
that we want to implement the
Yeah.
plan that we created. So, so I think we should reauthorize such a committee and start to appoint people.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it, and I think,
And particularly the subgroup that has a
subcommittee,
task right now, we
Yeah.
want to make sure but I think I would do it under that structure.
As opposed to the affordable housing task force.
Yeah, because I think I really like the idea that this is a part of it, and we want that group to be thinking about the comp plan explicitly. I mean, we know they will, but I think that it's explicitly part of implementing the comp plan. It gives context both to how they go about doing it and that this is a priority that, the town had already identified. And now it's become that much more.
What do you think, Mr. Fry? Are you looking for your own acronym as opposed to?
Oh, I'll come up with
some of the
something
CPIC?
creative, but yeah, I mean, I think at this point, if we looked at those parts of the comp plan that address the housing in particular, it already needs to be updated. It needed to be updated 2 years ago. So I know I'm just saying like, the way the market has gone and the conditions that have, landed upon us require that it needs to be updated anyway, just as a matter of course.
Well, I'd certainly be willing to do what I can. The name of the game these days is conversions.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we don't have a 3 million square foot mill building that we can convert into housing. So
Right.
it's a bigger, the business model is harder to fund, it's harder to figure out how to make the ends meet. And so what developers, the big D people are doing. That's where the money is, especially if there's an historic tax credits. So it's easy.
Yep.
But, I'd be willing to do what I can.
I mean, you want to be on the committee with me?
That's what it sounded like.
I'll be on the committee with you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
But it depends what's our timeline. I think we need a more, focused. Sort
I was really hoping that we'd meet for a month or two
of, okay.
tops.
Yeah.
Maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks or week and a half or whatever, and really do some consolidated, intense research and bang out some recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's good. And an undefined or indefinite.
Yep.
Is going to be harder, but yeah.
No, I'd like to have something
Let's
before
have
town meeting.
focus and
Yep.
report back to the select board. Well, that's good. That sounds good. I'm in.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So do we make a motion to recreate the comp plan implementation committee and at the moment appoint 2 members, or do we appoint members of these committees? I think we do.
Yeah.
How does that? Yeah. Okay.
You would have.
Yeah.
So we can start with these 2 and
We have to go back to the comp plan committee and get those people.
right. But we have to
Right.
Get interested again.
generally, I think it's better to ask people before we appoint
I know.
them.
Although you don't know.
That's true. Maybe not.
Maybe it
So-
works better this way.
Do you feel comfortable starting this sort of CPIC, or do you want to, is this?
No, I think that's fine. I absolutely agree that it should come through the comp plan. Absolutely.
Okay.
It could work as a task force. I could see it both ways. It makes more sense to me if we run it through the comp plan. Absolutely.
But to do it sooner than later.
But much sooner than later.
Like
yeah.
tonight.
Whereas the CPIC is a standing board, this would be a, finite and then it's done.
So you want to create that tonight rather than, you're not trying to chair CPIC at this point.
I am not trying to chair CPIC at this
Okay.
point. No.
But I think we're creating that, and this group is a subgroup of that. So
By
I
default,
don't think- I
members,
don't
members of.
I'm just trying to keep this simple.
Yeah, I
So
know.
that
It's a little
We
complicated.
just got,
Yeah. If-
so I'm kind of going back on my original thing and just saying, if we wanted to form a sort of ad hoc committee, I think we should just do it.
Well, if there's interest and there's anyone who's listening to this or watches this and is also interested and wants to contact the town manager and say, I'd like to be on the housing committee, let's have that talk. And I think, Tor and I are both citizens and there's no reason we can't begin talking to each other and doing research on our own. And then when we form the formal committee, take it to the committee and say, this is what we found, let's go.
All right.
And I just, the one more reason I like the idea of it being part of the CPIC is that whatever the outcome of this short term, it's not going to be done. And so that
Oh,
work
totally.
product will, the larger committee will be the natural body to keep working on it. It's going to be an ongoing thing, even though this task force is a short term thing. The issue is going to be.
Yeah.
So having that structure in place that we don't, I just think logically that's the next one.
See what you get for interest. What you feel about.
Yeah. I'll make some calls. And then we should reach out to the rest of the previous committee and see if they're still interested.
Yeah.
Go from there.
So thank you for trying to do something. I mean, it's a big issue.
Thank you for listening.
And then as a little bit of a, so we got the press here, they're gonna want to write something exciting about our meeting. And so, as one of our bold new initiatives, do we want to consider the waiving permit fees for
I'll make a motion that we waive permit fees for additional dwelling units. Second that.
All right. Moved and seconded. I guess discussion would be that we just want to make sure, see what we're doing, if we're setting a time frame on this, effective immediately, have an end date, might be a good way to do it.
Do we
So
have
renew
any
it.
applications in the hopper too, like that, effective immediately?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, it would be effective tonight, so.
Let's say do it through
Through the next.
next town meeting.
next
Not,
year.
a year and a couple months.
That sounds good to everybody. And then within that capacity, we're talking about the building permit. We're gonna roll plumbing permit for that additional dwelling unit in there as well.
Yeah.
And septic, if the septic
About,
needs.
oh.
Can we not-
Quick note about the
Yeah.
plumbing. The plumbing permit is actually a state plumbing permit. So if you want to waive that fee, the town would have to pay it.
I see.
It cannot go unpaid.
Okay. Maybe we'll leave that in there. Yeah.
So
Just-
just,
just
okay,
saying.
good point. Yep. So
Okay.
our fees.
So just our piece. Okay. All right. Any further discussion on that?
so are we saying? 13?
Well, through
It'll-
through
it'll
June,
end-
town
end
meeting
fiscal, it'll end
23.
Yeah. it's a- The town meeting is voting.
No, but it's just a,
That's
it's a
that's our
test. It's a
fiscal.
test. So we're
Sounds
giving it basically
Town
our
meeting
our full
2020.
full next fiscal year plus,
All right, all those in favor? All right, this is for nothing.
Now, if we're still gonna be bold, should we create the reserve account, housing affordability fund or something?
I would do that through the regular budgeting process. Yeah, wait on
I think that's a large discussion too for a couple of things. Maybe setting up reserve accounts, dealing with fund balance.
Yeah, I was hoping it would just be part of the budget discussion. I
Yeah.
think is natural.
The other issue that you brought up that I had thought of as well was the pending proposed legislation. And to my knowledge, the town has not taken position on such things and written letters to our representatives. But that's, I think something we should discuss whether we want to do that, whether that's an appropriate thing to do. I mean, we as individuals, of course, can all contact our legislators. But whether as a town, we want to take a position saying that we're concerned about this potential legislation. So I think that's a discussion we should have.
Or is it a matter of just voting on a resolution that home rule is important for some purposes, or, I mean, how specific or direct do you want it to be? I haven't read the bill in
Yeah.
its entirety. So I would,
So I'm a member of the Maine Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee, which is comprised of municipal officials, staff, and elected officials all around the state. And essentially will endorse or not bills that go through the legislature that affect municipalities all around the state. The Legislative Policy Committee did not endorse this bill, so the legislature will be receiving that feedback from the committee. But it's advised that if the community is concerned about the bill, to reach out to legislators today. And then
Is there a scheduled vote on this?
yes, let me find the date for it, but it's currently on the schedule.
it is. And do we know what Senator Maxim that he perhaps they take a position? Because that's what you're suggesting.
No, I'd
Exactly. Well,
reach out.
that would be the
Sit
question
down.
is, and whether, a statement from us as a board to them is obviously different than us as individuals communicating with them. And is that more powerful and therefore, I don't know their position. on this.
In my capacity on the planning board, I would be willing to draft a letter for your consideration if you'd like. Present it at your next select board meeting, give you time to review both the letter and the legislation.
So if the select board wanted to send a letter to our legislature on behalf of the town, giving examples of how this would affect our community, that's what the legislative policy is.
Did they have is there time sensitivity that doing it at our next meeting would be problematic? It sounded like you thought that it might be.
Let me find the date that this would. be
Appreciate the
voted on.
offer.
I don't have this.
I do-
And if
I don't-
our local legislators already are opposed to it, then. we would
We're just thanking them for that position. But,
It would, I believe, it's on the calendar for the next session. But I can send you all.
Okay, but it's not,
email
that's
when I
not
find
like
the
in the
date for
next
session.
week or two. I mean, I just don't know what the
don't.
legislative.
I don't know off the top of
I
my
wouldn't
head.
Well, I mean, there's degrees of statement, I guess. And so I think, yeah, I get maybe if you're not, yeah, okay. then-
Yeah, I gotta read it.
Yep, okay. Good point.
So we'll just see how that goes.
I'll draft a letter.
Yeah,
If you'd
yeah,
like.
that's great.
For your consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go from there.
And then just broader, Rob, do you have thoughts that we should have a policy of when we make resolutions or encourage our legislators to do so?
I mean, yeah, probably, that's probably a good idea. What kinds of issues are things that we, as a town, feel we should be?
We've done letters in the past.
Yeah.
Of support. Support or other things.
Generally only when we've been asked.
Yeah. But I think there have been other things that, our former town manager would see and look at and say, hey, this is something that maybe, affects us more directly. I can't remember what it was, but I know we've done a few.
A couple times he asked and we, and I can't remember the specific issues, but he was also on the MMA legislative committee
Right.
and would say, hey, I'm interested in this and I'd like to draft something.
So that's where a lot of that came from.
Mostly through MMA, not locally driven. So,
Like the visibility came because someone on the committee.
Mm.
Right. But it is a good thing to think about, David.
Obviously, things the state do have an impact on us.
right. I mean, and that's the thing why I think maybe a policy is handy, because somebody just may have a pet project that doesn't affect the town.
Or
They
affects
push
it
the
in a
board.
in a broader.
Yeah, or just,
thing.
yeah. loosely.
More political.
Yeah.
Right, state.
Well, I mean,
I mean, that's
you
the
do
only-
raise a good point. I mean, so from the planning board perspective, there was legislation passed in 2019 about changes to subdivision law that we have not implemented. Part of which is because we didn't know about it. But it's not, it's a non-trivial change. It's probably something that would require, should require public hearing, the town and everything for discussion. So, yeah, having a stronger interface there is not a bad idea. Well, did I eat up enough of your meeting time?
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Ben.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 8.1, town warrant for $198,262.73. Do I have a motion? Moved by Rob, seconded by Tor. Any discussion on that?
I've really got to ask, like, why pay a crematorium?
No, that's a confidential GA expense.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that is helping out.
General administration, right?
Okay,
No.
Assistance. Excuse me.
it was, yeah. confusing.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Passes 4-0.
Just didn't know if somebody was jumping.
Right. No, the town's not.
Fired up, yeah.
Right.
And then upcoming events, we got our April 1st, we have taxes due. So
Correct. Yep.
it's not an April Fool's joke,
No,
but second payment of the taxes.
Second payment after the rebound.
We're looking forward to that one, right?
always
So
a
that-
fun time.
You have anything to add?
Yeah, nomination papers are still available. The filing deadlines, Friday, April 15th. We have 1 seat for the select board, 1 seat for the school board, and 1 seat for Great Salt Bay Sanitary District trustee.
Whose term expired on the school? Josh.
Stephanie
Stephanie's.
Nelson. Yep.
She's served her time well.
Thanks, Paul.
Serving time. It applies to boards in prison.
Yep.
No, I mean, it's fun. We need people to get involved, please. Thank you. Yeah, and then town office is closed
Wednesdays at noon temporarily.
until we get staffing sorted out.
So with the new appointments, is Jody more full-time now? or is it-
Yep.
Right. Seeing nothing else, we have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Rob. Do I have a second? Seconded by Tor. All those in favor? All right.
You
Done.
almost made it through a whole meeting without banging that.